Okay, so here's the score here. I recently was contacted by someone who I believe they wrote a song with their band, and I really liked the song, and they sent me a private message because they wanted me to help them figure out some ideas for a guitar solo for it, because I think they got a gig coming up pretty soon. So I gave him a mode shape. It was a Mixolydian Mode, though kind of a different reworking of it, a different shape, and tabbed out the notes for him, and sent it to him, and he's still having a little bit of trouble. And I don't want to step on anybody's toes, so he asked me if I could do a video, an instructional video on this, and but I want to be able to speak to everyone. So what I did was I took the two basic chords that he's got that are kind of the driving force in the song, and I laid down a simple drum beat real quick, and I recorded basically the chord progression, but just kind of changed the rhythm around, because I'm not out to like take anybody's music or anything like that. So this is purely for demonstration. This video will probably end up becoming 2 videos, because I want to take my time and walk through it with all of you. And we're going to be discussing the key aspects that go into guitar soloing, at least from my perspective. The things that make, you know, a pattern or modes or scales or any grouping of notes sound like a guitar solo and not just like a scale pattern. And I'll do my best. This is kind of putting me on the spot. You know, I can't really rock out because I'm trying to break stuff down to you. And anyways, without further ado, let's get started. First up, the 2 chords that we're working with here that he's got several other chords, but there are 2 chords that really stand out, and they are a C5 and then a D5. He's playing the full version, of course, but that's basically the gist of that. He also pointed out to me that he's playing them down here, starting off the A string, but I'm going to use the chord examples up here, because that way I get the low E string in there, and it gives me all 6 strings that I can work with. I like to work with things on that level. Real quick, just to explain to you, since he's using these, what I guess you could call power chords, they're really great chords to work with because they're very direct in sound. They're really familiar to most people's ears and can be used in a lot of different types of music. And the reason for that is, if you were to think of building the chord out of like the major scale, you have your root note, which in the case of the C5, you have your C, and then if you count out the notes of the major scale, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you get the name, the 5 name, from having the root note and a perfect 5th, the 5th note of the major scale. Okay, and if you want to play the full version of that chord where you add the D string in, all you're really doing is repeating the root note. So you've got an octave with that 5 in the middle. Okay, it's such a pure sound that there's lots that you can do with that. Now it's important to note that when you're just playing a power chord like that, or a 5 chord alone, it's really a neutral chord. It cannot be assumed that it's really major or minor, because it's a powerful chord that just stands alone. You start getting your major and your minor sound when you start adding other chords into that, and they don't just have to be power chords. That's when you're working with the process of something called modulation, which is the timing in between, the distance between, and the blend of one note to another or chord to another. It's really, if you want to think of it this way, it's the psychological happening, the way the listener perceives, and it determines whether the brain interprets it as it's joyful and upbeat, as in major, or it's minor. So he's got these chords C5 to D5, which in my opinion could really take on a major or minor sound on their own. It's really just those 2 chords there are not enough to really determine if it's got a minor sound. For instance, if you went up, adding that 3rd chord, that's obviously more of a kind of minor sound. So because he's just using those 2 chords as the driving factor of the song, there's so many different patterns that you can use with that. Okay, and what he's doing in the song is he's really, I'm not trying to step on my toes, but he's sliding from the C to the D. So that's how I play it. He's got a different rhythm, and I don't want to copy his rhythm because I don't want to take his song or anything. But that D is the driving factor. It's a real central point in terms of the root note. So the scale shape that I showed him was the Mixolydian Mode out of C to line up over top of those chords. And I don't really want to hear any stuff, any gut from anybody, because it is the Mixolydian Mode, but I kind of combined a lower shape with an upper shape. Same notes, but better finger economy. And here's how I showed him to play. Oops. Let me do it one more time. I actually skipped a note because it's supposed to go, but I went ahead and went to that because I thought in terms of like a box shape pattern, maybe it would give him more ideas to work within. So I already sent those tabs out to him, and what I would like to do is that was kind of like the Tennyson Williams approach to it. That was the first thing that popped into my head, is that would be the mode that I would use over it. But that doesn't mean that would necessarily give him or anyone else the sound that they would like. So I decided to do a lesson using two different possible scales, the Mixolydian and the D minor pentatonic, which would probably be the more favorable choice because it's got more of a bluesy rock sound, which would probably fit better with this song. But I want to first take a look at the Mixolydian Mode. And what we're going to talk about now that we have our notes, and by the way, even if you don't know how to play any of these scales, that's okay. I want you to take back from this video the concepts, because you can take any scale and mode and apply these things to it. And I'm going to do this off the top of my head. It's kind of tricky for me. But there's several factors that I think about, and I think about them on the spot when improvising, and I think about them when I'm really putting my attention into writing a guitar solo. The first thing you should consider, in my opinion, is note arrangement, which is the first thing you could do is actually familiarize yourself with the scale. And I suggested that he play that forwards and backwards, ascending and descending, over and over again until he has those notes memorized, both by sound and by visual. Before I get into note arrangement, let me throw up the backing track that I recorded based off of his chords and play that pattern over top of them to show you how that lines up. Here we go, backing track with the scale over top. Here we go. Okay, so those are just the basic notes. I played them note for note in order, no special arrangements, and they sound pretty good with it. To some of you guys, your ears may not entertain your ears so much. I like the way those notes sound personally, but that's a musical choice. So the very first step after you get your notes, as you notice, they line up with it very nicely. You're good to go there, but you don't want to play a solo just like that because it just sounds like you're practicing guitar. So the first thing to consider, if you want to really put things in order, is note arrangement. And again, this is your choice. This is where things are aesthetic choices. This is the artist coming through, and nobody can judge it, because this is your own approach. This is your own work. But any of those notes, you don't have to play them in that order at all. You can skip over a note. You can skip over two notes. Sometimes you can add notes or subtract notes. And you can skip over strings. You can do all sorts of stuff with it. Let's see what I can come up with without the backing track off the top of my head.